Welcome to Akasha Talks, a podcast on consciousness, healing, and different ways to interact and weave those together, both old and new, to be able to get the most out of your life. I'm your host, Lance Baker, coming to you from Newcastle, Australia. Hope you kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome back, Rowan Ramsay. How are you today?
I'm good, Lance. Yourself?
I'm very good. It's been a brief minute since you've been on to talk about meditation, a month ago maybe. But you put out a book and I got it, and it's the best book I've seen on meditation, and I've read a lot of books on meditation, so I thought you got to come back and share. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, here it is.
That's it. The art of breath. Well, let's begin with the why you wrote this.
Yeah, so in 2014, after my father passed away, I was dealing with quite a lot of stress in life, and I happened to be cleaning out the larder, and I could smell the mold, and he'd kept peanuts in there for the birds, but sometimes they'd get wet before he brought them in from the car. He'd take them out the back of the car and they'd get rained on or whatever. So there was a load of mold, like peanut mold in one of the bins there. And I inhaled it, not knowing how dangerous peanut mold is. It's rife for aspergillus. So about 10 days later, I was itching all over, no visible rash. And then a couple of days after that, I started getting chest pains. I thought I had a collapsed lung or something. So went into the doctor a few times and they were like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. Done chest x-rays and whatnot. And eventually the district nurse came out and was like, no, something's wrong. We'll get you in to see the chest specialist. So went into PRI in Perth and they did some tests. My temperature was up at 104, really bad fluid coming out my lungs. They thought I had TB, so they isolated me. And I had a friend bring in a load of garlic and ginger, which I started consuming raw, and my temperature went down. So they sent me home after a CT scan and whatnot. And then about a week later, they got the results back for aspergillus, and I had 3 fungal balls growing in my lungs. So I'd lost basically the top section of both my lungs and had extensive scarring in the lower lobes from COPD as a result of this disease. So a few weeks into that, I was standing at the fridge and I noticed that some strawberries had gone moldy. And I was like, oh, yeah, sugar feeds mold. So I remembered about the ketogenic diet and started that, and started doing breath work that I'd come across over the years through my sort of esoteric studies. And when I eventually got an appointment with the lung physio, I showed them what I was doing, and they were like, that's way better than anything we could show you, so keep doing that. And he didn't even show me the exercises that he would have shown me, because the stuff I was doing was better. And I ended up clearing, they told me that I would be on meds long term. I kept on pressing them, what do you mean long term? And eventually I got lifelong, and I came off the meds in 2.5 years, and I can now do 4 to 5 minute breath holds and things like that. So my lungs are pretty strong. The emphysemic hole that was this size is now this size. So I've done quite a lot of regeneration. The scar tissue in my lower lobes is pretty much gone. There's still bits and bobs floating about, but it's not anywhere near where it was before. And it's through these exercises that I've put in the book, along with ketogenics and fasting and things like that for autophagy and that side of things as well. So it's been a battle, but a fun one. And I came to the conclusion pretty early on that this disease was offering me an opportunity to implement all the stuff I'd learned in life up to that point. And so I thanked it for coming and, used it as a lever to actually put into place some of these exercises and practices that I'd been learning for probably over a decade, but not actually implementing as well as I should have.
Yes, well, it's not just that health side of it on that physical aspect. years ago when I first started looking into Reiki and that, I was exploring different cultures, understandings of chi, prana, akasha, all the rest, and I I forget, it was something like 33 different names I found through different cultures, and about a third of them were the same or a similar word as what they had for breath. That you're also doing an energetic process
Yeah.
at that same time. And I know you're a mesmerist, you work with energy often as well, that this hasn't just changed your physical health, it's changed your impact.
Yeah. Like learning about breath and like this sort of road of understanding breath goes all the way back to childhood, to like games my father used to play with us. He used to do things like if he caught us mouth breathing, he would slap our jaw shut and things like that. So he was quite sort of direct in the idea that you should be breathing in through your nose. At least you can breathe out through your mouth if you want, but always breathe in through your nose. Um, and showing us how to do diaphragmatic breathing and things like that. Um, I think from him being an energy healer as well, and my sort of road into all of this stuff was a book, The Secret Science Behind Miracles by Max Freedom Long, talking about the Huna tradition. So that was sort of an interest of mine as well. And Hawaii means divine life force breath. That's the actual translation of the word. So um, it's always been there in the back of my mind, the fact that, we can survive, weeks without food, days without water, but only minutes without breath. So it's the most important thing really for us.
It is, and it's where we start, and it's definitely where we finish. It's with the breath.
Yeah.
Uh, so it is a deep, important part of life. And I also like, with your book, you haven't just focused on the physical side of things. It's very much a yogic and esoteric breath practice concept that you're looking into the psychic phenomena, everything as well of breath.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there on basic pranayama, but there's not a lot of stuff there that goes into the more esoteric stuff. So I've tried to include everything that I could find on yogic breath stuff without, going into sort of mudras and stuff like that and postures. But, if people are interested, they can start looking into that or give us a shout.
Yes. I the your book's structured well. I like it's
Thank you.
you've made it no secret to me before that there's some spectrum stuff involved, and the book is very clearly a spectrum book. And I get frustrated with meditation books because they're either written by idiots or they're written by hippies. It's essentially where most of them fit, and they're either just too flouncy and very wandy storytelling fluff. But this is straight and direct to the point, and you've pulled from a shitload of different sources, but you've made that same thing. Each one you've just got like a page to describe it, and then a paragraph of objective, half a page to a page of the instructions, what your benefits are from it, what the hazards are, and things to look out for. And that's it. And most of it's written in that point form, short, direct, that you can pick this up, flick to a new chapter, and learn a new breathwork thing in a morning as you're going to practice it, and go about it. Like I left you a review on Amazon, said it's a thing that you can use this book for life.
Yeah,
And
that was the idea.
once you get used to the structure of how you write, which should take people one exercise, it's twice as easy to go into that next one and adapt and move on. It's I find it fits in this fine line between scientific and esoteric without going woo woo. I love woo woo, and there's lots of places where woo woo is great, and lots in meditation. Like I don't know, active imagination, stuff like that. It's all woo. That's great, but
Yeah.
breath is science.
Yeah.
Structure. It opens up that esoteric, and yeah, this is just a simple, easy process with that.
Yeah.
What um what process of it do you think has made the most impact for you? The aspect of health saving your life, or the inner work that's come from that as
I
well?
don't, yeah, I don't think I can really separate the two, you know. Um, like my perspective is that we only really ever experience ourself and a reflection of what's out there. So we're the mirror that reflects the universe. And you know, as such, everything I do is both, you know, it's external and internal. And I don't think you can really separate the two. I've tried to keep as much of the sort of, you know, as you say, the sort of woo woo and fluff out of it, and keep it as practical so that, you know, anyone that's just looking at breath work for the first time should be able to read it and go through it and steadily progress.
Mm.
And anyone that's already doing breathwork stuff, you know, even if they're facilitating events and stuff like that, should be able to use it as well for a sort of a few ideas for different things that they could potentially be doing with their group or their clients. But you know, in respect of breath as a whole, I think doing the exercises causes shifts and changes on all the different planes of existence, really.
It does. With something you mentioned there, in full transparency, if anybody ever comes to a workshop of mine, it's going to be 90% stolen from Rowan now. You have to buy the book. It's me giving you a workbook. Uh, the what? How soon did you start to notice the difference when you started
Oh,
implementing this with the lung capacity side of things, of what was
pretty
happening?
much instantaneously. Like when I first started doing this properly, my breath retentions were under a minute. And within the space of a month, I got over 4 minutes. And within the space of 2 months, I got over five. So, like,
That's
super
pretty
quick.
quick. Well,
Yeah.
I know you're a little bit obsessive with everything you get into. So
You gotta do
how much
something, do it right.
how much breath work were you doing a day though? So just in case some people are thinking they can do a 5-minute thing, because I'm going to guess you didn't do
when
5 minutes.
No, when I was really ill, I was doing probably about an hour through the different exercises every day.
Okay,
Um,
that's
doing
less than I was expecting.
Yeah, Wim Hof on top of that as well. So I was going through the sort of the lung expansion and rejuvenation exercises and things like that in it. And then after I'd done that, I was doing the breath retention stuff that Wim Hof teaches, or a variation on that had worked. It was maybe a better option. Um, so that was probably another half hour on top of the sort of hour of doing the exercises for lung development.
That's a pretty small investment for
Yeah, it's
kicking
not a
a
lot.
lifelong disease.
Well, I didn't have anything else to do other than sort of like try and like heal my body. So, you know, I was signed off work for a few months. I did actually go back to work 3 months after I got ill,
Yeah.
back into finance. And, you know, that like it was about October, November time, I think 2014, that I went back to work. And everyone in the office around me was coughing and spluttering because it's, you know, people just don't take time off in finance. And they were like, you know, quite clearly flued up for the autumn winter season, and I never got anything. And I put it down to the breath work, ketogenics, and a couple other things that I was doing, and really sort of helped with that. But you know, when I got back into work, the time that you can sort of give to doing these sort of exercises does get reduced. You know, you have to sort of cut it up, so you're doing some in the morning, some in the evening, and things like that. Whereas before, I could just like get up, do some breath work, do some yoga, Think about what I need to do to heal myself, self-suggestion, these sort of things. So
Did you notice much difference when it was more smaller bits than one big bit?
I think that, yeah, there was a little bit of a reduction, but by that time my body was starting to get stronger as well. So it was sort of like,
Yeah.
graphs crossing, if that makes sense.
Uh, when I teach meditation, I try and teach people to do it lots of small times rather than
Mm,
one big time, because most people are not going to invest that hour into something where
mm,
lots of 5-minute breaks they can, but that's just knowing where the procrastination and excuses come in for the average person that's
mm.
not stuck in a difficult situation.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that it still did quite good once you had to adapt to that.
Yeah, I mean, like over and above the breath work, I was also doing Ashtanga yoga and like standard focus meditations on top of that as well.
Yeah.
And the Ashtanga, we're doing Ujjayi breath all the way through as well. So if I'm doing like half an hour of yoga as well, then I suppose we could class that as being sort of in the realm of breath work along with that.
Yeah. How did you find, have you noticed any change in your normal breath from doing so much focused breath?
I I had a good teacher in my father. So I've always been pretty good at diaphragmatic breathing. So in that respect, I think there's a bit of a change, but I was already pretty good at breathing completely anyway. My father used to get us to sort of like pretend to be dead. So this was like a game we would play where we had to pretend that we weren't breathing. And the way to do that is to sort of lie on the floor and loosen your jumper around your stomach
Yeah.
and just breathe with the diaphragm and try and not move your chest. This is the sort of the exercise that he gave us. Um, so, he was teaching us to do diaphragmatic breathing in a fun way for little boys to learn. And
Yeah.
I think I've always been one who listened to my father. My brother, maybe not so much in that respect, in the esoteric side of things, but he's an engineer now, so I've gone down the healing route. He's gone down the building route.
I'll have to play with that with the young one, see if he digs it. Uh, I I should have looked this up beforehand. I'd read something like 6 months ago that in America doctors used to always test the resting breath rate of people, and 100 years ago the national average was 6 breaths a minute, which I was like blown away with when I read that, because it's very different to what the standard is today, and like just that change as stress has built up of how much faster people breathe. Uh, have you noticed any difference with just your resting breath rate?
Yeah, I think it's definitely slower than it was. It's probably about 12 seconds per breath, 15 seconds per breath. So like 6, 7, maybe 8 seconds for an in breath and an out breath. Um, but there's things like walking exercises where you can count your heartbeat or your steps with the breath and things like that. And I just find myself doing this all the time. So I'm constantly, but you know, being sort of high functioning autistic, I'm hyper aware of what's going on in my body anyway. So I can just feel my heartbeat all the time. I can actually, if I look at a blue sky, I can see my heartbeat in the sky because the sky changes color. Like, well, it
Yeah.
changes sort of brightness with my heartbeat. And I'm assuming that's the oxygen going through my retina that's causing that shift. But I can just see it. So there's always been a high level of body awareness with me and, feeling energy. And so a lot of this stuff, I think, has maybe been quite easy for me to sort of lock in to automatic behavior. But, things like Ujjayi breath and the walking breath and stuff like that, I'm doing it constantly.
Yeah, I find why I asked if after doing it, did you notice a difference? If I'm implementing a practice, I notice outside the practice that my breathing shifts to be slower and deeper and better in
Yeah.
everyday life. And part of that, I think, is just that self-suggestion that I'm showing my subconscious this is important. This is what I'm doing, that it just starts doing it.
I think as well, like when we start doing some of these exercises that are triggering parasympathetic arousal, especially, because it's putting the body in that relaxed peace response, it feels better for our body. The body works better, the immune system works better, the digestive system works better, our mind works better. So if it's getting a more beneficial state to work in because of these breath patterns, it's going to start using them.
Yes.
It's going to lock them in more easily once you start to notice that. And it's like anything, if we're not consciously aware of something and we move it into conscious awareness, then we start to get this constant awareness of that thing that we've moved. So that, like, a good example of this is the memory stuff that I teach. Like if you're doing memory techniques like memory palaces and that sort of stuff, you're moving the story making part of the mind that's normally out of conscious awareness for people into conscious awareness. And as a result of that, after a bit of time, you start to notice the connections that your mind's making with new information that's coming in, almost like you're watching this story being written, and it allows you to change it in real time. So, that's probably one of the most profound shifts that I've noticed in the memory stuff that I do, which will be coming out at some point soon in another book, The Art of Memory.
Well, if it's structured like this, which I no doubt expect there will be some bits like that, it's probably going to be way better than the other memory books I've read too.
It's going to be an interesting piece of work. I think you'll really like it. It covers a lot.
Oh, I'm sure it will. Now, I have to loop back because you did say with your story of the healing aspect of this, and you pointed that out in the book as well, that you can't just say it was breath because you implemented other changes as well with the ketogenic and the intermittent fasting based stuff. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you were doing with that?
So, do you want to know all of the stuff that I was doing?
It's probably a big list, maybe.
It's not
No,
really.
yes. Okay.
The first thing that I started doing was like affirmations.
Yep.
And the basic affirmation with my illness was every particle of every atom of every cell in my body is constantly phasing in and out of reality. So there's no reason why it shouldn't phase into a healthy state.
Mm.
So I was doing self affirmations like that and had them on a recording of my voice, listening to it, like whenever I was walking or driving or anything like that, that would be going.
Very similar to Emil QA's one there.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose it's actually, yeah. So that might have been one of my sources for coming up with this, to be honest. But I'd been looking at quantum reality and the fact that nothing actually exists and it's all just energy and information. So, there has to be a blueprint for a healthy me. So why can't my body just phase into that? And the study of sort of ketogenics, when I remembered this, looking at that strawberry in the fridge, I started actually looking at it properly and, implemented keto. And it was hard for the first few months, I kept knocking myself out and having to go back into it. And the switchover was more difficult than it is now once I'm fat adapted. That switchover between glucose and ketones is much smoother. And you can actually just, it feels like someone's turning on a nuclear reactor in your system. It's like energy and clarity, like better sleep, like clearer REM cycles, shorter, deeper, deep sleep cycles, all the rest goes with it. But with that, I started looking at it and came across a load of different studies showing that you could produce stem cells. So I think MIT and Harvard did a couple of studies on this, and one was showing that you produced large pools of adult stem cells in your intestines. And another study showed that you could reverse kidney damage that would normally need dialysis because of the stem cells being produced in keto. And there's other things as well, like, bacteria feed on sugars. So you can apparently survive sepsis for days from a burst appendix instead of hours if you're in a ketogenic state or a fasting state. And viruses use the glycogen system in cells to self-replicate. So if there's no fuel in the glycogen system, then viruses can't self-replicate as easily. So it slows down the spread of bacterial infections and viral infections and stuff like that. And obviously, molds feed on sugars as well as proteins. So there's an element of that for the energy that they use. So, looking into this, I was like, okay, so if my body's producing stem cells and they can get to my kidneys, they have to be going through the blood. That's really the only way from the intestines to the kidneys. And I'd been looking into stem cell treatment in America. It's like 10 grand or something. And they take some bone marrow and culture a load of stem cells and inject it in your blood with the hopes that it's going to help repair the COPD and emphysema. And I was like, my body's doing that anyway. Why don't I just do, and I knew about the Sherpas in the Himalayas and the fact that they have more alveoli in their lungs than regular people. And that's to do with them doing exercise at high altitude. And you can get like altitude masks and stuff like that for sports people to train with. So this is a known like phenomenon that this happens. So at that point, I figured that if I do a variation of effectively Wim Hof's breath hold, but doing the exhale hold after doing 20 to 30, 40 breaths, hold on the exhale and then hold again on the inhale for as long as I can. That there's a thing that happens called the vagus nerve swing, where when you breathe in and fill your lungs, the pressure in the upper spine tells the vagus nerve that the lungs are full of gas. So it starts pumping your blood faster. When they're empty and the pressure's in your lower abdomen, it signals to the brain and the nervous system that there's no gas in the lungs. So it slows down your heart rate. And this is why the heart rate slows down as we breathe out and speeds up as we breathe in. So that inhale hold is now telling the body that there's gas in the lungs. So it starts trying to pump the blood, but I'm still holding my breath. So the idea behind this was if there's stem cells in my blood and I'm doing these breath holds on the inhale as well, and the body's going, okay, there's gas there, but I'm still not getting oxygen, build new lung cells. So doing that in combination with the lung cell stimulation exercises and things like that are in the book as well. I can show you the x-rays to show that the like this new capillaries going through the lungs, this reductions in the emphysemic holes, all this has happened. And how much of it is self-suggestion, how much of it's actually breath work, how much of it is keto, how much of it's the autophagic stuff. Like I can't separate it all out and say, but this combination of these sort of four main elements has been the main road to me healing.
It doesn't take much imagination either to see that small ingredient list can help a lot of different situations with
yeah, definitely.
But been somebody who does hypnosis and has done for a long time. I know how massive that power of suggestion is. Somebody who's done energy healing for even longer. I know how much like breath makes a huge difference to what things are. Keto, I can't speak for it as much. I've done it a handful of months, a few times, but every time I've been so much clearer. That is the best bit I get out of it is the mind clarity. But I remember before I tried keto the first time, I tried to quit coffee and I couldn't do it. Like I was having narcoleptic crashes on the couch in the afternoon at like 2-3 o'clock every day. And then I went down to Melbourne to study some hypnosis, and I was having later nights, and I couldn't cope. I cracked, and I had to go back on coffee, broke it. And then when I tried keto, my coffees were like milky and sugary. They were a dessert. They weren't a coffee.
Yeah.
So I started keto, and I'm like, well, more than my day's carbs are in this coffee. I can't do it, and so I'm going to go black. Try just straight black first, rather than bulletproofs and all the rest. I was like, I can't do it. So I just went without. But I was a day and a half, 2 days, and didn't need coffee anymore. Eventually, I went back off keto when my son was born, because there was no food in hospitals that I could get to make that work. I'll start again in a few weeks. We had lockdowns. It did not happen. Ended up getting back on coffee again. And then the next time I tried keto, I went off coffee again within 2 days, straight away. I've stayed off coffee for years now without putting that silly addiction back in. But it always blew my mind of how much I struggled, and just how easy it was. The energy.
Yeah. I think, like, for me, there was a shift probably about the 6 months into, having to stick to keto, where I stopped associating food and drink with sensation seeking. There's a lot of stuff that's comfort. And, we go for the pizza because we like it, or the chocolate bar, or whatever it is. And it's not necessarily that there's good quality nutrients in there. So it very much shifted from being like something that I'm just eating because I want to eat that, to something that I'm eating because my body needs something out of it. And a good example of this was the juicing that I was doing. So I was doing, like, veg juicing. And the first couple of days, it was vile, like, really, like, oh God, how could I drink this? But I was like, nope, I need to drink this. And after a few days, maybe a week or so, your body starts to go, oh, I'm getting good shit from this. Excuse the language. And it was, you know, it changes your taste, and your body starts to crave these disgusting green juices, and you start to actually enjoy the taste of it. And I can only put that down to the fact that your body's going, I can get the nutrients that I need from this. This is high quality food for me. This is fuel.
Yeah.
And at that point, it sort of separates the emotional side of consuming food and drink to being okay. And you start, like, well, I did anyway. I started having dreams about specific things. So, like, I was dreaming about nettles one day. So I got up in the morning, did some sort of idiomotor stuff with a pendulum, and asked, "Do I need to eat nettles?" It was like, yeah. It was like, "Can I have spinach? It's got a lot of similar things." Nope. Does it have to be nettles? Yeah. Okay, go and get some nettles. So I juiced a load of nettles that day and drank that. But there's things like dopamine and serotonin mimicking compounds within the sting of nettles. So there's some good things in there that aren't in spinach, although there is a lot of similar stuff in there. And my body now tells me, like, I listen to the little, like, nudges. So I think that again comes from my father telling me to talk to the trees when I was a little boy.
Yes. Well, anytime I help somebody lose weight, or when I do it myself, of changing dietary patterns, when you go on to reach for something, the question I get people ask is why? If you're going to break it and have it, but only have it while asking why, to start to get that transparency of what you're really getting out of it. Of it's emotion, it's not flavor, it's not the experience, it's you're self-soothing in some way usually.
Yeah.
And yeah, keto definitely does change your taste senses. I vividly remember after being on it for quite a while and breaking to have a cupcake that just looked amazing, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I had like a bite of it. I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's way too much sugar, and it had barely the sugar in some of the things that I'd had in the past.
Mhm. God, I used to have sugar sandwiches when I was a kid. Like, literally.
And the impact it makes, like, or being on keto, or breaking, just have a little bit of sugar and it was okay, and got back on. And then a few days later, had an emotional day where I broke, and I just ate sugar all day. Uh, and I felt like trash the next couple of days after that. Like, my
Like
head
you get a
didn't feel
carb
good.
hangover.
Yeah, my guts didn't feel good. My energy was gone. Like, couldn't concentrate. It just, it gives a very clear, transparent um, understanding of what your body needs. I A friend actually sent me a video today, not knowing we were doing this, about if you treated a lifetime of human existence as a like 100 years. We've been eating processed wheats since yesterday, and refined sugars in the way we have for like the last 4 hours, and the crappy vegetable oils and stuff for a few minutes. That we've drastically changed our diet in the past 100 years to what it has been for human existence.
Yeah. I mean, my diesel van runs on like rapeseed oil quite happily. It's fuel for your car, not necessarily fuel for your body. So,
Yes.
like understanding different oils and what they do and how your body can use them, I think is a big part of like getting into that keto space. Like people go for these MCT oils and stuff like that, and they're like, coconut oils, roughly 50% MCT oil, which is really quick and easy to convert into ketones for our body. It doesn't say that like other oils aren't still energy for us,
Mm.
but some oils are better to convert for us than others. Um, so there's lots of little tips and tricks on that. I've got a website, theketocoach.co.uk, that's got loads of free stuff on there about ketogenics and fasting and various bits and bobs.
And that was the other bit I was going to ask about with that. You said it's not just ketogenic; it's been fasting
Yeah.
as well. So what has been the fasting process you've used? Because everybody's got a different understanding of what fasting is. I found.
Yeah. So like something happens when you fast from food, where your body starts switching on autophagy or autophagy, however you want to pronounce it, tomato. Um, so when we restrict sugars, our body starts burning fat and goes into ketosis and produces stem cells and things like that. And it changes some genes, some get switched on, some get switched off. And then when we restrict protein as well, we start to need new protein building blocks for the new cells that we create. And we create thousands of new cells every day. I think, tens of thousands of cells every day. So when we're in a place of abundance, if you think of the analogy of the bear here, like summertime, bears are eating salmon, things like that, and berries. If they find a bush with berries that they can eat, they will eat the whole bush. And carbs stimulate our appetite, because when we find carbs in that hunter-gatherer scenario, we want to consume as much as possible and put on as much fat for the scarce time of winter. So this is like, it ties into things like paleo diet and stuff like that. But there's a reason why pretty much every dessert on the planet is a mixture of carbs and fats, because carbs stimulate our appetite and fats satiate us. So it lets you feel satiated but still want to eat more. And like this is the trick of pudding, this basically. So the benefits of water fasting can be almost achieved through something called fat fasting, where we only consume fat. So I've done 25 days on coconut oil and lemon juice, and I was having that 3 times a day. I've done 7 days on water alone. And generally, I'll just use the fat fasting option, because I don't have a lot of body fat, like I've never had a lot of body fat. So, keeping that energy level up by consuming fat and consuming coconut oil specifically, allows me to not get fatigued. And the meditation work, the breath work, and things like that, on top of that, you can feel the shifts and changes in your body. So it's almost like you start to be able to, well, for me anyway, I started to be able to feel my whole central nervous system.
Yeah.
And you can feel the energy centers like the solar plexus and dantian, these sort of chakra points, if you want to call them that, throughout the body as you're doing the work. And that's like a huge convincer, I suppose, in some respects, that you are actually directing energy to these different points through the different practices that you do in meditation. So there's a huge benefit to that. And there's something as well in this that a lot of people overlook, because people will start a fast from a glucose diet. And it takes 2 or 3 days to switch over to keto generally if you've got a reasonable amount of glucose in your system. So day 2, day 3, you've got all of these hunger pangs because you're not eating, and you've got the keto switchover. So, some people get like keto flu where they're having headaches and feeling nauseous and, all these sort of things going with that switchover. It's never really been a huge issue for me, but, some people do occasionally get those sort of symptoms. So they're getting that switchover happening and the hunger pangs. Whereas if you switch to a ketogenic diet for like 3 days before you start fasting and your body's already running on fat, the fact that it's running on fat satiates your appetite. You don't have this high an appetite, and you're already running on fat, so you don't have the mental fatigue, the like fog, and all these sort of things that go with that running out of glucose in the system. And so when you're actually starting fasting from day 1, effectively, you're going into autophagy instead of from day 2, day 3, and you don't have the difficulties. So it's a huge benefit for anyone that does fasting to switch to a ketogenic diet for 2 or 3 days at least before they start fasting. It's a game changer that no one talks about.
No. The bulk of the people I hear talk about fasting are usually vegans that are usually far from ketogenic with their diet. Oh,
Yeah. And like, on that note, like I've done 6 months on vegetarian keto and 6 months on vegan keto. It can be done. It's not hard. People say, oh, you can't do that on a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet. Yes, you can. Like, you just have to be careful how you structure the lifestyle. And it is a lifestyle rather than a diet. So, that's a big part of it as well, I think, is people making excuses that they can't do this on their specific diet.
yeah. For me, when I've done keto, I've found the hardest thing is if you don't prep, that you can't go out in society and expect to have an easy way of the convenient meal.
Well,
There's options.
not for your friend. Like,
Yes.
you can get good quality nuts in pretty much every supermarket on the planet, and stick to Brazil nuts and walnuts and things like that, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
If you go for the cashews and peanuts, then you're probably going to kick yourself out of keto. But there's always options for a snack,
Yeah.
and a couple of handfuls of nuts, and then you've got a lot of energy in there from the fat, so it's not really an issue.
No. Yes. So I'd love it if you could give everybody a couple of exercises or one to play with of what sort of thing is in your book.
Yeah. So, like, before I do that, I think it would be beneficial to mention something about people that are in an anxiety state, and something that I've
Yes.
noticed in my practice over the last 14, 15 years. Like, pretty much everyone that comes to me with anxiety is breathing in their high chest. So they're breathing up here or even just in the shoulders. Because you've got like 3 main sections. You've got your diaphragm, and then the sort of mid chest and the upper chest. And people will be breathing up here. And if we're like running away from an animal or something like that, we're not diaphragmatic breathing, we're chest breathing. And that chest breathing allows us to release energy. It triggers sympathetic arousal, like activates the adrenaline system and lets us run away from prey. You know, so it's a really important aspect of it. But if you think about it, like if you're like running, doing sports, going out for a run, whatever, cycling, these sort of things, you're not breathing with your diaphragm, you're breathing with your chest. And that allows us to release energy in the system. And once we understand that, we can start to hack the vagus nerve effectively. Because, you know, as I mentioned before, when the lungs are filled up in the top area here, it triggers the vagus nerve into sympathetic arousal. And when the pressure's down in the lower abdomen, at the lower spine, it triggers the parasympathetic arousal. So it triggers that peace response. So we can use that, and like one of the breath patterns that I'll show you here actually hacks that in a really, really fast manner. But, you know, understanding that, and, you know, if you do work with clients, noticing how they're breathing and teaching them how to breathe diaphragmatically, and, you know, even teaching them the ha breathing that I'll show you is hugely beneficial, because it gives you like 5-6 breaths and you're instantly in a peace response. So I think that's important to sort of cover first.
Yes.
The most sort of fundamental practice in the sort of more advanced practices within the book is the Yoga Complete Breath. And this is basically taking control. So I'm going to sort of like, I think I can probably sit on sideways, put this down. So you start by breathing in here and pushing your diaphragm out and pulling the diaphragm down. So that's your diaphragm.
Yep.
And then like when you're doing the complete breath, you want to create almost a wave. So this comes out and then this comes up and then this comes in and this comes down. So you're doing. And that'll give you effectively use of all of the sections of your lungs. So working with that and playing with that and getting good at it is really the first step in a lot of these exercises. And you use that complete breath before you start doing things like rhythmic breathing, which has been rebranded as box breathing, and, you know, all these different sort of techniques that we've got in modern breath work. So it's good to take the time and learn how to do that. And, you know, lying down on your bed or something like that is a really nice way to sort of do that, and just put a hand on your stomach, hand on your chest, and make sure that as you breathe in, the hand on your stomach's coming out first and then the chest. And as you breathe out, you're pushing in the stomach and pushing up the diaphragm before the chest falls. So super simple, takes a little bit of practice, and always breathe through your nose. Nose is the filter for your lungs. If you're breathing through your mouth, you're getting all of that dust, all those particles, everything into your lungs. And there's nitric oxide produced when you breathe in through your nose, which helps with oxygen absorption. So, you know, you actually get more oxygenation of your blood if you breathe in through your nose than your mouth, which is just nature being cool. So, you know, that's the sort of the main foundational breath for a lot of the exercises in the book. But the one that sort of helped me with my my lung regeneration and working with the ketogenic stuff is, I'm not going to take you through this because it's 30 or 40 breaths, but I will explain it. It's one of the sort of the extra gifts in the back of the book. And I've called this the Ramsay breath because, hey, it didn't have a name, so why not just give it my name? So you just do like 30 to 40 complete breaths, and you'll feel your system tingling at that point. You might feel a little bit lightheaded, so don't do this when you're driving. Like, do it when you're sitting down, and, you know, make sure you're safe, because I know of people that have done Wim Hof breathing while they were driving and crashed their car and stuff like that. So do not do that. This is, you know, like it'll give you a little bit of a high, and, you know, it's also, I suppose, in some respects hypnotic, because you're focusing on one thing. You're doing a monoideistic trance with the breath. So 30 to 40 complete breaths, and then push all of the air out your lungs and hold on the exhale. And I do this with an oxygen monitor on my finger. I'm like checking my oxygen, blood, like heart rate, things like that. And the heart rate slows down massively. Your blood oxygen slowly goes down. And then when I can't hold it any longer, I take a single mouthful of air. So that's it. And it's just enough to trick my brain into thinking that I'm breathing. And you can actually do a cool visualization here, like while you're doing the exhale hold, just imagine you're still breathing, and it allows you to go further faster. So that's like a little side hack that I didn't put in the book that I probably should have. But just imagining that you're still breathing tricks your brain into thinking that you're still breathing, so you can go a little bit longer. And keep your eyes closed as well, because the visual cortex uses a huge amount of oxygen. So processing visual imaging that uses your oxygen. So having your eyes closed for this allows you to go longer as well, which is another little cool hack. And then after that initial tiny little breath, like the mouthful of air, do a long, slow inhale. For me, I do a constriction of the larynx, like the Ujjayi breath. And so I'm doing but on the in breath, and doing a long, slow in breath. And then when I get to the top of the breath, I eat air. So I'm basically doing this. I'm going and sipping air into my lungs and filling my lungs and stretching them. And then I hold there for as long as I can. And that's the point where your lungs are now full of air, your heart rate starts to speed up, your body's going, okay, there's gas there, I can do the exchange. And if you're in a stem cell rich state due to ketogenics or the autophagy, things like that, it's going to start using those to hopefully build new cells in the lungs. So this has been my daily practice for the last 10 years. And the one that we can all do just now to get a feel for what the sort of parasympathetic arousal that happens with breath work is ha breathing. And this comes from the Hawaiian tradition. And this was one of my routes into sort of really practicing as an energy healer and a therapist in some respects. It's what got me into hypnosis as well. And it was the Huna stuff, and then mesmerism, and then hypnosis, rather than hypnosis, and then mesmerism, and then the other way around. So the word Hawaii as well means divine life force breath. So it's a nice little nod to what they knew about this stuff. And for this one, we're going to hack the parasympathetic arousal. So as we breathe out, the body does parasympathetic arousal and slows down the heart rate, as I've mentioned. And as we breathe in, it speeds up the heart rate. So if we can shorten the in-breath and lengthen the out-breath, we'll get longer periods of parasympathetic arousal in the system than sympathetic arousal. So for this, the best way to do this is with your heartbeat. But for this, I'll do like a clap on this side for the in-breath and a clap on this side for the out-breath. So we'll do like 4 or 5 rounds of this, maybe 6 rounds. And breathe in through your nose for the count of 4, and then out through the mouth for a count of 8, and make a noise like. And everyone, I think, that's watching this or listening will have had the experience of being in a stressful situation and walking out the room or walking away from that situation and going.
Noise cancellation is taking out the cool effect of the ha.
All right, sorry. So yeah, you do this sort of ha sound, and it's a sigh. When we're leaving a stressful situation, we often do this sigh.
Yeah.
And most people have had that experience where you're just walking away from something and you just let out a sigh, and it's almost like it just lets all of this energy that's been there out of the system. And the Hawaiians used to do this in groups, and I use this with groups as well, just to sort of center and align the group so they're all doing the same breath. So breathing in through the nose for 4 or 3 or 5, extend it however much you want, and out for twice as long, making that sigh noise. And it's a constriction in here in the larynx. So you're like tightening the larynx a little bit. And it's the same constriction that we use in Ujjayi breath, which is the sort of the breath that we do with the Ashtanga yoga and things like that. But with that, we're doing it all with the mouth closed and just breathing through the nose and making the C breath. So if we give this a shot and follow along, Lance, and see what you think of this.
Yep.
So we'll do in for 4 on this side and out for 8 on this side. You're okay with breath work. So anyone that's doing this at home, if you need to shorten this, feel free. If you want to lengthen it, if you think you can do that, then go for it. So you ready?
Yes.
So in for 4. You should feel that.
Yeah,
You
I can
feel it?
feel an energy
Yeah.
shift.
So for me,
Quite
I'm
quickly.
feeling like all across there, right down through my chest,
First
through my
around the
back.
face, over
Yeah.
the back, in the gut.
And it's like this nice tingling sensation. And that's you triggering parasympathetic arousal in a really big way in the autonomic nervous system. There's other little hacks that, I mentioned to you before of like closing your eyes and pushing them to one side.
Yes.
You'll start to get salivation in your mouth. And that again is the vagus nerve being triggered, this time by optic nerve pressure. And again, triggering parasympathetic arousal. But, for all of the exercises that I've found over the last 45 years on this planet, this one here, heart breathing, is the number one quick fix for getting you into a peace state. You can, if you're in a stressful situation, you can nip to the toilet and do 5 or 6 of these breaths and you're reset.
As long as the stool next to you doesn't stink, then that's okay.
Yeah, well, you can do it in front of people as well, because you can actually do the ha breathing through your nose. Like once you get into the feeling of the constriction of the larynx, you don't need to do it through your mouth. You can just breathe back out through your nose. You're just doing a sigh through the nose, and no one notices. So if you're in say you've got social anxiety and you're in an environment where that's being triggered, you can do this under your breath with no one any wiser and just reset your system. So it's a really powerful little trick. And there's a few things like in the book. There's one study that I cite there that was done in New Delhi where they're doing left and right nostril breathing to trigger sympathetic and parasympathetic arousal. And as soon as I read this study, I was questioning. I was like, is this just a cultural bias where they understand the fire and water channel from a cultural perspective, even if they've only heard about it once when they were a kid or something like that? There's still that knowledge within their psyche that one side activates fire and one side activates water. So if we redid those studies somewhere where there wasn't that cultural knowledge, like say America or like United States or something like that, would we get the same results? Or is there an element as the placebo, as the belief that we have a fire channel and a water channel coming in effect? And I'm not saying that there isn't a fire channel and a water channel. I'm just questioning whether that would show up in the same level in a study done somewhere else where there's not that knowledge about this. Whether it's real or not is another question, And I've done the same with prana in there, like for people that are skeptical of energy. I know that me and yourself aren't, but for anyone that is skeptical of this, there is a possibility that it's placebo. But what is the placebo anyway? It's the body's response to how we're using it, whether it's thought or physical things like a doctor giving you a sugar pill. So, even if it is placebo, if we just believe that it's going to work and going to have an effect, it does. So why not use it? And why not lean into that? Because there's even if it's not placebo, then there's going to be a placebo effect alongside that, because there always is. So
An extra powerful placebo.
yeah, so just boost it with self-belief. And on a side note, beliefs are all faith-based. Knowings are empirical knowledge, but beliefs are all faith-based. So like one thing I ask people is, could it rain meatballs tomorrow? And it could, like as soon as I asked myself that question, I remembered a story about it raining fish in a town in America or something like that. And it picked them up during a water spout from some lake nearby or something like that and dumped them on a town. So if that's possible, then it's possible that a tornado or something like that would pick up a load of meatballs outside a meatball factory that have been discarded out the back and drop them on a town. So it could potentially rain meatballs. But unless we try on that belief and go, what if? Our brain never makes those connections.
Mm.
And this is the wonderful thing about beliefs, is that we can just try them on and see how they fit. So you can try on the belief that maybe the sun's not actually a burning ball of gas. Maybe it's actually a portal to divine energy. Maybe black holes are the other side where that energy gets taken back into the universal mind or something like that. And we can try on that belief, and we can hold multiple different beliefs at the same time about the same thing and switch back and forth between them to see which perspective is the most beneficial for this situation. And that's what I'm sort of trying to get at with that section on prana in the book, is that, why not just play with that belief and see how it affects things?
Yeah, the power of imagination is huge. And it only takes imagining something to be able to build a belief that you can trust because you've played.
Yeah, and that's where the belief becomes empirical knowledge, doesn't it? If you try on the belief and find it to be true, then you have a direct experience of that thing, whatever it happens to be. And at that point, it goes from a belief into a gnosis, really. You're like, yeah, this works, and I can feel it.
So I've got a curveball question for you. Because you're talking about the hard breath and making us do that. I remembered that when you're breathing out with your mouth, a ha is a hot breath and a hu is a cold breath. Do you know how that happens? I've never known, but I've noticed you can breathe hot air or cold air into your hands just by the sound you make.
I'm not sure about that. Potentially, there's a vibration in the vocal cords or something, or the larynx that's doing that. Who doesn't have the constriction the same way? There's not the forcing of the breath here. And like on a random side note, there's a piece of Egyptian art with I think Horus and Set on either side of something that looks like a pair of lungs with a trachea, and they're pulling on either side of a piece of rope that's tied in a knot around the windpipe, if it is a windpipe. So there's a potential that this constriction of the larynx was known about in Egypt as well, but it's just a random side point. There's different breath patterns that'll heat up our body. There's different ones that'll cool it down. There's all sorts of interesting patterns, and most of them are in the book there. So,
Uh,
but I don't know why that one particularly cools it. That would be my guess, though, is the constriction of the larynx on the ha rather than the.
if you don't mind me asking, you've got this book has a pretty diverse thing in there, like I said, from esoteric stuff, Eastern and Western traditions by the looks, and scientific based things. What's some of the sources you've pulled from? Because like I said, you've done this very formulaic of it. You've tried to fit it all into the exact same stuff, and I've read pretty diverse books on different practices. They're not listed like that in any of the esoteric books I've read that are clear and straightforward.
Yeah, the first section, the sort of the science of breath is a lot of my own research and bits pulled from various different sources. The pranayama techniques, I'm a qualified pranayama practitioner, teacher. So the basic pranayama stuff comes from there. And then a lot of the more esoteric stuff comes from things like Atkinson's Science of Breath and things like that. That book, The Science of Breath, was really the one book that gave me the keys to the kingdom in regards to breath work. But a lot of it's, the patterns are lost in the text. You have to really sort of read through a chapter to find out exactly what he's trying to get you to do here. So my sort of idea behind this was to pull those sort of things out and put them in a structured format so that people could just use this as an exercise book. And they can read the bit at the start of that section if they want to learn a little bit about the breath work. But really, it's a series of steps and objectives for this breath work, and any sort of benefits you might get, and any tips and precautions for each one.
It
So
definitely is much more straightforward than anything William Walker Atkinson's written.
yeah, but like I have to cite him because he's a big influence. There's a lot of his stuff that I regard very highly.
He's great. Everything he's done for mesmerism and you thought was fantastic. But he's not
Your
always
mind,
straightforward.
yeah, your mind, how to develop, train, and use it's another one that I think is a piece of gold. This idea of, we're taught that the conscious mind is the analytical powerhouse and the subconscious is the storehouse of emotions and memories. This is a fallacy. How often have you fallen asleep with a problem and woken up with a solution? Was it your conscious mind that did that? No, your unconscious is the great powerhouse of analysis and reason. Learn to load stuff into your subconscious with a view of working on a problem, and go in and check on it every once in a while. And I realized when I read that, I was like, okay, this is how my brain works. Like I've been doing this for years, but now I know what the process actually is. I can consciously use it instead of it just being a byproduct of how my brain's working.
Mhm.
And little things like that in some of his writing is phenomenal. So there's a few other things that I want to, and this is part of the sort of idea behind the Insane Alchemist Publishing House, which I've set up for publishing this book. Is to look at some of these older books and re-edit them for a modern mind, so that we can actually look at the exercises and go, okay, this is how we do this. And some of them might be a little bit out there. Like I'm working on one for the psychic research company of Chicago and London that was published in 1890 or 1900, early 1900s. And it goes through the development of the will, hypnosis and mesmerism and things like that. But it also goes into developing psychic abilities, and the new religion of Zonism, which is the magnetism religion. And so it goes into some pretty woo-woo stuff.
Yes.
But at the same time, I mean, the pamphlet or section on developing psychic abilities is structured in a really interesting way, because it teaches you how to do muscle reading first. And you have to learn the muscle reading, which is also like Hellstromism, I think it's called. But this is something that mentalists use. So it's a really wonderful instruction on this process for mentalism. And if you get good at that and start to pick up the subtle cues in the body system, the next section of that pamphlet or that book goes into how to then take that and develop genuine psychic abilities, allegedly. But I'll leave that up to whoever practices those exercises to discover whether that's true or not. So, there's a few other things that I want to work on with this, as well as putting out some of my own stuff. I've been working on a number of books for the last few years. So this year is the year that most of these are going to hopefully get finished off and get put out into the world.
Forward to seeing a library built. Now, if people want to buy the book, where can they get it?
It's worldwide on Amazon. Just search for The Art of Breath. If you can't find it under just The Art of Breath, then put in my name as well, Rowan Ramsay, and it should come up. But it's the first day I searched for it, I couldn't find it until I put my name in. But now it seems to be coming up just with the title, because it's sold quite a few copies. So
Excellent. I put your name on it, but I bought it straight away. And I got the soft cover, but you got a hardcover available as well.
yeah, there's a hardback there as well. And I think anyone that's looking it's a little bit more expensive just because of printing costs and so forth. But anyone that's looking for this as a manual for their work, I would recommend get the hardback. It's just going to last a bit longer. I know Amazon covers on the softbacks have a tendency of, but I've chosen the sort of the non-gloss finish, which seems to be a bit hardier than the gloss finish one. Like I've seen ones where the gloss finish is starting to peel on the
Feels
corner.
like, yes.
So, I've gone for the best quality that I could. It's on the better quality paper as well. They're sort of cream paper, so it's got less bleed through than the white paper that I've seen Amazon stuff. So I've gone for as good quality as I could in the choices that they let you make with the printing. And anyone that's like wants to put this out in their shop as well, it's available for extended purchase. So, big shops can buy it from Amazon for a discounted price and stock it if they want to.
As soon as I started flicking through it, I thought I should have got the hardcover. Yes, probably it's going to fall apart on me.
I'll maybe send you one. So we thank you for this as well.
No, you don't need to. And you said before about like you do ketogenic coaching and stuff with hypnosis and mind development. I'm going to presume if somebody wants to get some mentoring of rather breath work and everything like that, they could do that for you too.
Yeah, it's actually got that, I think, on the back of the book.
There we go.
It says if seeking further guidance, yeah. So it's got my website there on that. So
all of that'll be in the show notes for everybody as well. Thanks for joining us again, Ron. I've appreciated it, I've enjoyed it, and I'm certain some people at home have learned something.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, I hope it's been beneficial for at least one person.
One person can get the change you did. It definitely will be worth it. But I think just for a novice and somebody who wants to have a feel and a play with breath work, this is perfect start, and will take you all the way through. It's simple.
Yeah, I've really
has all the building steps.
Cover the whole thing from start to finish. So hopefully that is. And I think, as you say, the autistic mind comes through. I think my mind seems to be able to connect things that other people maybe don't connect in the same way. So hopefully there's stuff in there that's, gives people a moment to think.
It is. I think you've pointed out just in it, autism can be a superpower, and for breath work, this autistic traits have made a superpower of a fucking good guidebook for the basics of life that you need to do from start to finish. Breathing.
On that note, I really don't like neurodivergent. I think we should rebrand this as neurospectacular.
Yes.
Neurospicy, I don't really like that either, but neurospectacular, that's, the high functioning autism is really a superpower. We have more data points to process. So it can be tiring, we can get overload and need to switch off from the world. But, if you give someone with autism the space to actually be able to use their gift, they'll surprise you.
Yes. More and more. My personal belief is it's an evolutionary step based on the lifestyle we've thrown ourselves into in the modern age. I could be wrong. That's my belief.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, an intelligence spectrum disorder. There's a level of creative, and like this ties in really quickly. This ties in with ADHD. Because there's this neurodivergent or neurodiverse wiring in people with ADHD, but does that happen because people haven't learned to focus? So when we're children, we don't have the ability to direct our focus. It's directed by our biological needs, and we have to learn that focus. So if we never learn the focus, then our mind becomes highly creative and is constantly looking at different things and connecting different dots. Whereas someone who's learned to focus really well maybe doesn't do that. And in the hunter-gatherer scenario, if you're out in the wild, being able to be aware of everything around you and then hyper-focus on the hunt is a superpower.
Mm.
And does that create a neurodivergent wiring in the brain? What wires together fires together. What fires together wires together, sorry. And if we then teach ourselves focus at a later stage in life, once we've created that neurodivergent wiring from the ADHD, rather than the neurodivergent creating the ADHD, I think it's the other way around. And then if we train focus, we get a mind that can focus on a problem and have all these data points to work with. So we effectively like build a high functioning autistic mind through the training of focus with the natural ADHD, which is a cool concept to play with. But anyway,
It is.
thank you very much for having me on again. I do really appreciate it and love our little chats. So
Thank you. Keep doing what you do.
will do. Likewise.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and perhaps learned something new. If you did, I'd love for you to subscribe or drop a review on whatever favourite podcast you have, or if you've been enjoying the video versions on YouTube or Facebook, do it there. If something really did click home for you with this episode, perhaps it could benefit one of your friends or family. If so, it'd really help if you shared this on your social medias. Until next time, you've been listening to Akasha Talks with Lance Baker.